Okay, round two recording. Let's see. Jason or Cody, who wants to go next? I don't care.
I can go.
Perfect. All right, you can get your screen up and shared. And while you are going, I will, again, I'll send you a private message if you hit 12 minutes. So. Perfect. Good.
All right.
Yep. Oh, good.
So I did mine on the Enigma machine. The little bit of history behind it. It was mainly used in World War II. The first invented one was made by Arthur Cerebus in 1918, just after World War I. And then it was first just like a commercial type of thing, mainly for companies that need like a secure way of sending out messages and stuff. It wasn't used a whole lot by companies, but it became mainly used by the German military, and the German army in particular first introduced the Enigma machine in 1926 to their army, and then they started out using the Enigma 1. And the Enigma 1 had a normal Enigma machine just had a keyboard that you type in whatever message you want, and then it output another message as the ciphertext. And the Enigma 1 had a plug board, which was a second keyboard that was on the bottom of it that you had two ends, and you plugged one into a letter and then plugged the other one into a different letter. So say you would plug it into T and Y, then when you press T on like the keyboard, it would actually like output the ciphertext based off of the Y key because it switched the two. Then as World War II started to near, all of the German military used it, including the German Secret Service. And at the start of the war, both the German Army and Air Force both used the Enigma 1. The German Navy made their own version of it that just added different like cipher wheels to it, making it more secure. So they used the Enigma 1M, and then the German Secret Service used the Enigma G, which was also another version of it that had irregular wheel stepping. So instead of just moving one spot, the wheels could move multiple spots. And Japan actually also had a version of the Enigma machine, but they didn't have it till later, towards the end of the war. And they got a simplistic version from Germany because the German nation basically owned the rights to the Enigma machines. So that's the reason why that's the reason why we mainly know Germany for having the Enigma machine, because no other countries could really get their hands on the actual Enigma machine. They'd have to make their own like version of it. And Japan's version was a lot less complicated. It didn't have a plug board, and it was basically like the first version of the Enigma machine, so it was really dumbed down. Now I get into exactly how the machine worked. Like I said before, you'd have like a keyboard and you'd press, say, like A, then it'd go through the different calculations, and it'd like output a ciphertext letter for it. So for at least the Enigma 1, it had three different wheels that the ciphertext letter would have to go through. So it would first pass through the plug board, which was that little board on the bottom that they could switch different letters with. Then it would pass through all the cipher wheels. And on the other side, it had a reflector, which would send it back through all the cipher wheels again. And then it would output the ciphertext. And so like for the Enigma 1, it had 4 different rotors or like cipher wheels, so that there's 24 different configurations they could do. So they could have 4 different rotors in the first slot, 3 different in the next, 2 in the third slot, and then just 1 in the last slot. And each rotor would rotate to a different letter based off the configuration that they had set up. And then a little bit behind the machine's math. So on top of the 24 different variations that they could have for the rotors, each rotor had 26 letters of the alphabet. So in total, there was 17,576 different starting configurations. And then that's just off the wheels and the initial configuration. Then on top of it, they could add even more configurations with the plug boards, and it'd come out to that huge number of different different variations that they could do for the ciphertext, which definitely shows why it was so hard for them to crack the code and why it took them so many years, because they first knew about the Enigma machine actually before the war in, I think it was 1939, and they didn't solve or crack the code until about 1941. So again, in the cracking the code and how they managed to do it, the Allies created the bomb, which decrypted the Enigma machine messages so that they could figure out how the settings on the machines were. And the bomb was the equivalent of 36 Enigma machines wired together. And once they'd intercept the ciphertext would basically go through each set of Enigma machines, and it tried just about every different starting configuration that they could do. And then the bomb was developed by Alan Turing. He was part of the British Secret Service. And then along with the bomb, the bomb wasn't the entire solution to cracking the code. The British managed to sink German subs, and they would go into the subs and steal their code books. So then they could also figure out the different codes that the Germans were using, which helped out a lot to figuring out exactly how the Enigma machine was set up for the Germans. And then the Germans also had a routine to each message. They started out each cipher with a weather report and ended it with Hail Hitler. So the Allies could guess some of the letters of the ciphertext based off the starting and ending points of the messages. And then the Enigma machine also had one weakness, which it couldn't map. It couldn't code a letter to itself, which took out a few possibilities, which it wasn't a lot of possibilities, but it still helped the Allies figure out the machine better. And then after the war, it wasn't used very much just because of the weakness, and they had the bombs, so most countries could like figure out what the ciphertext was, so it was very unsecure. And it wasn't used much until Russia improved the design in 1956. And basically they just added different rotors to it. And they also added different like irregular wheel stepping so that it could move multiple places, and it just made the messages secure and harder to crack. But right around this time, it was also the time that they were coming up with computers, which the computers could solve these ciphertexts a lot easier than the bomb could. So ultimately, they just basically phased out just because of the computers, and people already knew the weaknesses behind the Enigma machine. And that's about it.
All right, questions for Jason?
Did the United States have an analogous machine?
Like, do you mean?
Some basically the same thing but different.
Yeah, they the developing of the bomb, or like the how they decoded the messages, goes to the British for figuring it out. But the U.S. also during this time, they also figured out another, or made basically the same thing. And it was about a year later in 1942 that they made their own design of it.
Okay.
Any other questions for Jason? Do you think that Enigma would have remained secure if it hadn't been for, I don't want to say operator error, but the other stuff like we heard about in Joshua's presentation, right? Electronic voting is not secure because of human error. Do you think Enigma would have remained secure if there hadn't been that human error component associated with it?
Yeah, I think so. Just because it's like the German routines and all that, like how they started each cipher with a weather report and ended with Heil Hitler, that definitely made it a lot easier to figure out, because then they can just guess letters and guess what the settings are for it.
Yes. Once again, human error. A well-designed cryptosystem is not helpful if you get people involved. All right, thank you. I will have you stop sharing your screen.